And today we're going to be speaking to Eckhart Boehme to talk about his Jobs to be Done framework called The Wheel of Progress. So thank you so much for joining us today, Eckhart.
Thank you for inviting me, Ryan.
No worries. Just a quick reminder on the format. There is a Q&A tab. We've just realized there's no chat tab. I'm sorry for that. So please post questions in the Q&A tab and vote them up, give them the thumbs up, and I'll sort them by whichever ones have the kind of most likes, and I'll start to answer those first. We'll be going through Eckhart's work and the way he looks at jobs to be done, and periodically I'll stop and I'll start going through all those Q&As. I won't leave them all till the end, so feel free to kind of post a question in there as you see it kind of being relevant to the discussion. So let's get started. Eckhart, why don't you give us a bit of background to kind of who you are and how you first came across Jobs to be Done and why you found it so appealing? Yeah,
well, it's great to be here. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and thank you, Ryan, for inviting me to join first this great Jobs to be Done community, and also to present our work today, our Jobs to be Done framework, if you will. And by profession, I'm an industrial engineer, so I studied the business side and the technology side. And like 30 years later, I found out why I did this, because this is exactly the work I do now, is trying to connect customer needs with solutions. I spent over 18 years at Microsoft. I worked in Redmond for 12 years, did a lot of product management, marketing management, but had always a huge passion for product management. So I helped the company to build product management skills. And during that process, I learned about the way Microsoft was starting to think about how to create value with the value proposition process that was introduced 2005. And this passion turned into a job. So the last 3.5 years, I trained the marketers on product management, on marketing management. And this was just by my passion, my interest. And then I came back to Germany 2009 after the financial crisis. Then I thought, well, how can I expand on what I've done? And I looked into the business model canvas from Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur, what they developed, and went to his masterclass in 2016. And there was the first time I heard about Jobs to be Done. And I thought, wow, this is such a fundamentally new way of thinking about customer needs. It makes so much sense, so much more sense than what I've seen before. Is where people put customers into boxes, target group segmentation, personas, and those kinds of things, which are not causal. I thought, this is revolutionary. I want to learn more. So I kind of went to all kind of resources, Bob Moesta, Chris Big, Clayton Christensen, of course, all the kind of the luminaries, all the people that we know have really pushed this forward. And so I started to create also learning content around this. And 3 years ago, in August 2017, I ran the first public Jobs to be Done class here in Germany. There, I joined my business partner, Peter Rochel, who's also on this call. And then I found a great resource, the Jobs to be Done interview cards. I translated those into German. And then I heard about Competing Against Luck, which is a book from Clayton Christensen that totally changed kind of my perception of Jobs to be Done. And I thought, wow, this is great. I helped to develop the German version to make sure the language is right. And then we started to practice Jobs to be Done. We worked with customers, we educated customers, but we also ran into some big issues. One issue was like explaining it. Took a long time. I don't know anyone who can, like, in one sentence explain what it is. It's fairly complicated. It's really great. It's a great concept, but it's still for us, it's hard to explain what it is. And the second challenge we found out was how to really make it work, how to operationalize the interview part, the evaluation part. And we felt, well, although it's a great methodology, it's a great concept, it's a great framework, it's so hard to apply. So, and then I'm going to stop in a second, but that really caused us to create a new tool starting last summer that we felt was supposed to make things much easier for practitioners.
That's great. That's great. I know you've done some translation work as well. Did you translate the jobs to be done cards, and did you translate part of? Yes,
exactly. These are the jobs to be done training cards, or jobs to be done cards created by Jonathan Briggs. He's a former King's University professor, now lives in Singapore, and he has a huge passion about jobs to be done. And I got these cards and said, well, this is great. You can kind of easily learn to conduct jobs to be done interviews. So this was a good starting point, yeah. And I also was a subject matter expert on Clayton Christensen's German book of the German version, Competing Against Luck.
Wow, wow. How did you use the cards, and like, what kind of value did you get from them?
Yeah, to us, it's all about giving a jobs to be done interview a meaningful structure, and not kind of to forget key questions, and quote unquote ask the right questions and try to avoid wrong questions. I know there's no right or wrong, but there could be some questions that are misleading. So it's nice to have a structure and use the cards as a supporting tool to ask the right questions, to get the customer's story of buying the product and using the product out of them, to find out some underlying forces that you probably wouldn't hear in a normal conversation, because you need to extract those from customers. Customers have a hard way to articulate their needs, so these cards are great help.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you kind of translated the cards, and you kind of helped translate some of the books. Where did you go from there, and how did you arrive at the kind of wheel of progress?
Yeah, so first, I mean, it was amazing, because I had just giving lots of talks about jobs to be done, but didn't expect that any major client would knock on my door and say, hey, can you help us apply jobs to be done? We have a project in mind where we would like to test it. So my first big client was the Frankfurt Airport, Fraport AG. They own lots of airports throughout Europe, but they said, okay, we want to create a 5 to 10 year strategy for our air freight operations. And I said, yeah, you can do it using jobs to be done. There was a little bit skepticism, because I thought jobs to be done is more appropriate for the B2C market, not so much for B2B. But at the end, they were convinced we could try this. We could give it, let's do a pilot. And we did just one interview and one evaluation, and they were convinced. I said, okay, this is such a different conversation that you're leading with interviewees, because it's so product agnostic, right? You're not trying to sell them anything or push them into a certain direction technology wise. It's an open discussion. It's just being able to listen, and the customers really appreciated it. They said it's great that someone is talking to us, and just with an open ear and absorbing everything. And after this first interview, there was with a freight company. Then I did more interviews with airlines, other freight companies, cargo handlers, and also customers. And this turned out into a project, and presented back the results. And the results were taken like as they were, because they came straight from the customers and are implemented right now. So the big learning for me out of this project was like people, if they feel what they have done, the methodology they have used in the past, they feel that it doesn't work for them anymore. It doesn't work as it should. Then they look for something else, and eventually they run into jobs to be done. They read the book. They went to Harvard Business School, took the class, or discovered one of the videos, and then they are open for something new. And then there were other companies coming to me and said, "Hey, we want to do something differently. We don't want to do the quantitative or the qualitative like we did in the past." And that opened doors for me. And then we said, okay, we can do projects, but it's, to us, it's more meaningful if we can help customers, if we can enable them.
Yeah.
So we want them to be able to do it themselves. We don't want them to be dependent on us. So there were not only consulting projects, but also education, workshop opportunities for us.
Mm. And having kind of read Bob Moesta's work and Clayton Christensen's work and all of that, what made you kind of create the Wheel of Progress? What was your struggling moment to go and create something like that?
Yes, great question. It was really after Peter and I, we have done some projects jointly, some projects separately, and we felt the tools that we have is good, but it's not as good as it could be. We have used the timeline, we've used the forces of progress. We had some other charts that Bob had developed and published in his book, but we felt it's too fragmented. It's like when you work with clients, when you work in teams, you have the wall kind of full of separate posters with separate frameworks, with separate tools. We said it's still too hard. It's still too hard to do, and it would be perfect if we had one poster, one canvas, if you will, that combines it all, that combines everything that's necessary to really understand the job to be done. And so we started to merge the timeline. And I guess people who are joining this call know what the timeline is with the different events, and eventually people buy and have an experience with the product. We combined that with the forces of progress, and the turn was like first like a straight line with the forces, and then we thought more about it. And we said, okay, it cannot be a straight line. It needs to be a circle. It needs to be a circle because the shape needs to be a circle because customers make progress in cycles. When you really think about it, it's not, there's like not one beginning and one end and then it's good. No, it's always in cycles. There's always a break between the cycles when people feel good about what they have. So we said, okay, that's the right representation of reality. It needs to be a circular shape that represents the cycle. But then we said, okay, we got the timeline, we got the forces, something else is missing. And we know from Clayton Christensen how important context is. And we said, okay, what else, what kind of context do we build into the tool, into the model? And then we thought about, it should be like the constraints. I mean, when we talk about context, we are not interested if this wall is blue or black or green. That doesn't affect the job. But what's interesting is what's hindering people, what's holding them back from making progress. And these are the constraints. And I'll show you later on how we did that, how we think about constraints. So, and then we had like 3 pieces: the timeline giving the overall structure. We know people make progress in cycles. They go through these different steps. Bob Moesta calls them the dominoes that needs to fall in order to motivate people to move forward. We got the force, we got the constraints. And then we said, okay, this is great for collecting the data, but then we need to analyze the data as well after we've done the interviews and mapped them onto the wheel. And then we had 4 corners, and we said, okay, let's do something with the 4 corners. Let's summarize the forces into these 4 corners. And then that was basically the structure. Very easy. Not we thought as little as necessary, as much as possible, and nothing more. No, let's cut out the clutter. Let's cut out the noise. Let's just focus on these things to help us understand how people want to make progress in life.
Great, great. So before I ask you to dive into the wheel of progress, let me just quickly share my screen. And so this is what Eckhart was referring to in terms of Bob Moesta's jobs to be done timeline. And Bob talked about this in the last event that we did. And for Bob, it always starts with the first moment. You know, what was that moment when people thought, I need to solve this problem today. And then it goes through various stages of passive looking, active looking, the deciding point. So, you know, what trade-offs am I going to make? Who am I considering? And what am I going to trade off when I make that purchase decision? The point of buying, the point of first use and onboarding, and then ongoing use throughout that. And so as Eckhart said, there's a bit of a linear process here. So I'm really interested to see how you have kind of built on this idea of the timeline, but kind of changed that into a bit more of a circular process. So I'll just stop there and I'll hand over to you and I'll let you talk us through the wheel of progress.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to share my screen and you should see the first slide in a second. So, can you see the slide already?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these are the three elements. You can see these are like two smileys. One is green, the other one is red. One is happy, the other one is sad. These just represent two kinds of feelings or two kinds of forces. It's like a positive or it's a negative one. Later on we refine those, but these in general these are the three elements that we are working with. Then we have this is a lock that represents the constraints, so things that lock you in, limit your ability to make progress, and then of course we have the timeline. This is the product we came up with after I don't know how many iterations we had. Peter and I, we fought over each pixel of this wheel of progress, and we thought we need to keep it as simple as possible, but also give the clues that people kind of need in order to know what to put in terms of context. So this round shape is the cycle. We call it the cycle of progress. These are exactly the kind of the distinct points of the timeline that you just showed, with the first event, the second, first thought, the first event. The send clock is a second event that pushes you to look after concrete product, and the thumb up is okay. I'm hiring a solution that could be a product, a service. So this is where I left off. You can see the timeline just as a circle. You can see in the inner of this donut, we collect all the pushes and the pulls and anxieties and inertia habits, the four forces from the forces of progress diagram. And then we have in the middle, we have the constraints. This could be outer or inner constraints, or the amount of time sometimes is a constraint. An outer constraint could be in the Corona crisis right now, any laws signed into place that restrict you from doing certain things, from requiring you to wear a mask. Could be inner constraints, it could be health related, could be your financials, could be time related. You only have a certain time, amount of time to complete a task, and so this is how we work with a canvas. Usually we have a first step where we gather and map the interview data. So we use, for example, the card deck, do a jobs we've done interview for 45 to 60 minutes. We collect the information already. We have a note-taking sheet, and then we transfer the data onto the wheel, and you can see the different color codes that we use, blue for the events, then of course green and red for the forces. We have in purple, we have the competitors for the job, and in pink in the middle we have the constraints. This is just help us keep oriented throughout the work. And first step is just plain collecting the data. And the second step, how we work with the wheel, is then we sort the forces, we move them into the right corner, and you have to understand that we try to simplify the how we work with the data by combining opposing forces. So in the first wheel, in the top left, we have the inertia habits, and we have the push from the situation. Something is wrong. So we have one green, one red, for example, in the top right corner, where we typically move more in the face of what is the room for the solution, where we build our idea, what the outcome should look like, what are the desired outcomes. In green, what are things that we want to avoid with the new solutions. These would be red. And in the third quadrant, in the lower right, we have the trade-offs. We have the things that we like about the new solution, and we have things that we don't like about the new solution. And these opposing forces. So we have the struggle in all the quadrants. And in the fourth quadrant, in the lower left, where people evaluate their solution, we also have green and reds, because we know that there are certain things that people are maybe positively surprised. Okay, I got this electric car, but I noticed that it's so quiet that music sounds much better, and that's something they didn't expect, or they experienced something badly that they weren't aware of or didn't expect. So we collect all this data, and also also we collect here all the jobs that collectively make up the kind of the big overarching jobs, because we know that there's a hierarchy of jobs, and but we need one place where we collect all these jobs. So this is basically how it works. So first step, collecting data. Second step is analyzing data, parsing the data, and sorting them into the four quadrants. And in the lower left, you can see also some icons. These are for evaluating. So the evaluating these jobs, when we have like, is it tangible? Is it satisfactory? Is it done very satisfactorily or not? What's the upside of doing this job much better? Can we remove existing pains? Can we create new gains? Are the questions that feed into the evaluation at this level. So what we do is basically we do all jobs we've done interviews, and then immediately after a short break, we evaluate these on the wheel. And Peter and I, we are now at a stage where we even, during the interview, at almost real time, evaluate the interview. So it's so super quick. You can, it sounds like silly, but it's like, wow, we do the interview maybe for an hour, take a quick break, and then for an hour, 1.5 hours, we evaluate the interviews, and then we are done. We can do in this way probably 2 to 3 interviews, including evaluation, per day. And this is very, we feel this is super quick, and it's very specific, because we look for certain things, we filter out certain information, and these are the things that we collect on this wheel, are the things that we really think can be used in order to make better decisions, in order to make decisions about the product, and also for marketing and sales. Here you can see.
Could I just ask a few questions?
Please.
On back on the wheel of progress. just before I do, anyone that's kind of new to jobs to be done and new to doing customer interviews, what Eckhart said about doing the interviews and then trying to analyze it as soon after the interview as possible is a great tip. You don't want to go and do 10 interviews and then have to go back through them all and analyze them. You'll completely forget what people said and it will take much longer. So that is a fantastic tip. I wanted you to maybe expand on the kind of hierarchy of jobs that you talked about. You said it on your Wheel of Progress slide that you had a few back. You had the post-it notes where you put the kind of higher level jobs to be done. How do you start to create that hierarchy of jobs? I know a lot of people that I've spoken to kind of have a bit of a struggle around that.
Yeah, basically you find all kinds of jobs. Maybe in a job interview for about an hour, you find maybe 5 to 7 or maybe even 10 jobs. And they are all at different levels. They can be very roughly, they could be like a purchasing job. So that always is a big deal. If the product is complicated, it's very new to the customer. They don't feel very comfortable buying something, then it's a buying job, right? And you can facilitate that job if it's complicated. And then there's a huge usage job. So realizing the progress by applying the product or the service. Very roughly, these are jobs that you will find that we collect in the lower left-hand corner. And then you can, once you have collected all these jobs from different interviews, we have then yet another step where we combine interviews from across the interviews. Because when you have one subject, let's say maybe e-mobility, and you do like 6 interviews, you have 6 of these wheels, and then you need to consolidate, you need to combine them. And then you also do this on a job basis where you collect all the jobs, and then you combine them, you cluster them, and then you find like a name for it. It's like paraphrasing. And then maybe out of the 60 jobs, maybe there are 10 jobs that you have paraphrased, that you summarize in this way. And then you can build a hierarchy. You can look for which job feeds into another job, and then you can maybe have a big job is like to improve travel to work, but that consists of many different jobs at different levels. But you can do, if you like, you can build that hierarchy. I've done it with my projects. That it helps you to structure the data to look at what jobs fit together. So if you want to apply for a job, then it probably makes sense to apply for the whole cluster within that hierarchy. And then there could be segments where you say, okay, this is not what I want to do, and someone else can do it, or we do it at a later time. But it helps you really to cluster. But the key thing is people most likely, and in particular, I think in the consumer space, won't tell you what the job is. You will always need you apply your brain, so to speak, and make up that job, construct it from all the data. And we have seen this so many times, and then went back to people and said, is this your job? Is this really what you wanted to do? And then they say, yes, of course, I've never looked at it from this perspective. But it's work you need to do, because people cannot put it in words.
Yeah, I agree, and there's definitely an art to doing qualitative interviews that you need to do with jobs to be done, and you know, a lot of the time it's what people don't say, and it's the subtext to what they're trying to say is where some of the insight lies. So I definitely agree with that. And so the kind of struggling moment and the desired outcomes are typically found in those kind of push and pulls that, you know, come from Bob's work. How do they kind of manifest in this, and do you construct your jobs around the struggling moment and those desired outcomes?
Well, so first of all, when you look at the quadrants, they are full of struggles. I mean, every quadrant has like one force that kind of pushes you forward. the other one is holding you back. One is positive, the other one is negative. And you have these, you have the fights between the forces all the time. It's like in the first quadrant in the top left is a push big enough so you move, that you leave your comfort zone, if you leave your habits. And the second one is, well, what do you want? And there's also risk in your mind. It's like, oh, if I, for example, if I move homes, if I move into a new neighborhood, is it gonna be safer? Is it gonna be better for my kids, or is it gonna not so good? So you have that struggle. In when you buy a product, you have also struggles because you look at something very specific at a product. You look at the feature set, you look at whatever descriptions, you look at the price, and then you think, well, this is maybe too complicated, or it's too expensive, or it's never gonna pay back. It's not gonna do a good job. So we have the struggle also in this quadrant. And also when people use the products, not every product has its pros and cons, and when you realize these pros and cons, and this is real world. So you have struggles all over. And we try to, and that's why we paired up the forces to show what these struggles are. And then the jobs are then put in the fourth quadrant, and they could be also, it could be based gain based. It's not always in our minds, not always a struggle. It can be a very positive job. It can be a super positive emotional job. But everything kind of course, all the frustrations and struggles feed into every piece of the cycle, if you want.
Sure. And when you talk about the kind of frustrations and struggles, and how you've grouped the drivers and barriers here, how does that relate to what you said prior to this slide around the constraints? Because I really liked how you framed the inner and outer constraints to progress. How do they all feed together?
Yeah, the constraints are really interesting, because the constraints by themselves, by definition, they are not positive or negative. They are just constraints. And people struggled during the interview. Was this, did we hear a constraint, or was it a force? And then we can say, okay, if it caused a feeling, can you say if it's positive or negative, you can say it's force. But if it's just neutral, it's just a matter how to deal with that constraint. With Corona, we see there was an event at the beginning of the year, the outbreak of the coronavirus, that in and of itself didn't cause anything. But then some things happened. So events happened. Governments acted based on this challenge. They changed the rules. They created constraints, and these constraints. So you have to stay at home, kind of go work out, whatever the constraint is. These started to cause pains, a lot of pains for people, especially for businesses and people who need to stay at home with little kids, so the constraints created pain, and for some businesses it created gains, or I mean, we know that for online shopping is like at its high, but for most consumers and many events-based companies, it's all created a lot of pain. So you can construct this in the wheel with the events that cause the constraints causing pain. So in the top left corner, we would put them, and then people look for different solutions, like we do today with Zoom and other software solutions. We went through the cycle at 6 o'clock. We hired a new technology, and now we are experiencing also pains and gains. You might drop out just 10 minutes ago. It was a big pain, so that helps us really to make these jobs we done actionable, which we really like. And when you talk about personas and target group segmentation, those are not actionable, but jobs, you can apply for the job and can make sure there's like 100% uptime, whatever. So we think with these three simple elements, we can we can kind of explain the world, if you will.
Sure. And so constraints are a bit like context, right? Because lots of people kind of use jobs to do in different ways, and I've heard people talk about
Exactly. It could be like the data protection law was a good example. So it was signed by the EU, and suddenly you have to act in a different way. You're restricted. Or if you have a health issue, it's like an inner constraint. Or if you have certain financials, you don't have all the possibilities in the world like rich people have, that have kind of millions on their bank accounts. They can behave very differently than you. I mean, in terms of, I don't know, travel, whatever. Or it could be like a time constraint. Peter has a nice story where he hired the first time a rental bike, and he had like 5 minutes to sign up and rent the bike. Otherwise, he would be too late. So there was like in the purchase cycle or in the hiring cycle, there was a constraint. So it's for us as interviewers, we have to ask those questions. Was there something that held you back? And then getting people to talk about their constraints and learning from that. And later in the solution, we think when we know the constraints, which are really hard constraints, not just cultural things that you may or may not perceive as a constraint, but really hard constraints, then you can work with it. Then you can help the customer find or create solutions that help people to overcome those constraints. Like Airbnb enabled people to travel for small money around the world and stay maybe in not so great accommodations, but visiting places they would not have been able to do before. So maybe they have not thought about this as a constraint, but when we actively think about constraints, then we can help the customer in a much better way.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was talking to some students earlier today about jobs to be done, and I was talking about one of the limitations of jobs to be done, and for me I felt that jobs to be done was very individualistic, and it didn't take into account some of the macro sociological, cultural trends that were happening, and it focuses too heavily on the purchase journey. But what I like here is where how you've recognized the internal and the external constraints here, and factoring in those broader macro events and contexts that can shape customer behavior that I don't think is captured by other approaches that I've seen to jobs to be done. So that's interesting. But I guess those macro sociological, cultural trends, contextual trends that are kind of that you call the outer constraints, could they also be outer opportunities as well?
There could be. I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes constraints go away, right? I mean, if the coronavirus goes away because there's vaccine, then these rules or regulations will eventually disappear. That creates new opportunities, of course, for new business. We hope that businesses that are lying down right now will be will come to fruit again. But it's a dynamic process. There are building constraints, there are disappearing constraints, and they impact people. And all we need to do is to understand what the impact is, and you can see also in the middle of the donut, we have in these very bright gray shapes the arrows that typically happen during these times as a reminder what can happen. Like at 12 o'clock, we have the push could increase, but also you can get inspired by something that you see, that you run into and say, okay, there is something new that could fill the gap in my brain where I perceive there's a gap, there's an open question that I need to solve. So in advertising, it's getting the people at the right time. Right, this is really key. Talking to the people understanding where they are in the cycle, and then coming out with the right messaging and creating opportunity. Because you asked for where opportunity comes from, it's getting people at the right time.
Yeah, sure. Right at the top of the conversation, you talked about building on Bob's timeline, and you felt that Bob's timeline was too linear, and you've created a circle here. So, can you explain like how you go from awareness right through to experience, and then back round again? Like, what is the circular motion that's built into your model?
Yeah, here's some kind of text that I don't know where it comes from. So, so your question is about the symbols, or can you? Sorry, can you explain?
Sure, no worries. No, it's not about the symbols. I guess Bob's model goes from the first thought right through to using the product they've just bought. You recognized the kind of consumer behavior isn't linear, it's circular. So how do they go from experience back into awareness? What is that circular process that you're trying to represent with this model?
So yeah, when you the one symbol I didn't explain as an event is like this, these circle-shaped arrows here on round about like 8:30, where people have used the product, they have accepted the product because it does the job well. Then you can see the break in the circle. It's like where this white, looks like a white arrow. This is where people don't feel a need to change. This is like the nirvana. Everything's fine. It's like the Eskimo doesn't need something for cooling food. It's like everything's fine. I don't have that problem until eventually something happens. Constraint changes. They get married. They get fired from a job. They get something happens that affects them, where they say, okay, something is not well. Eventually I will need to change. They don't go off and do something. They don't buy, they don't look for solutions, but they are open. They're open because they feel in the back of their head it's something that eventually they want to need. So this is built into the tool, and you can see that the circle is like it's like a wheel that always it turns and then it stops until the first thought occurs, and then it turns again, and you cycle through your life. You maybe as a car manufacturer, I can think about if I'm BMW. First, I start with like the 1 series model, and you don't start with the 7 series unless you're born like super rich, but you start with a smaller model, and then you cycle through that job to be done and want to make progress. And the next model maybe is a 3 series, or it's the next model is a 5, and you upgrade, and then something happens in your life, and you want to buy a smaller car again. But it's always about making progress. It's always about helping our customers to upgrade to the next step, to cycle through the next upgrade, and offer them something. That's why it's so important for us to understand the whole, like 360, the purchasing decision, understand where people are in that in that cycle and what we can offer, and also product-wise, do we still have the right product? When we talk about jobs to be done and our wheel of progress, we typically don't talk to people that never have done any qualitative research, because they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't appreciate, they wouldn't be able to appreciate jobs to be done, most likely, unless they have written a book or watched a presentation or something. So we always need to get the people at the right time.
Yeah, no, I like that. And when I've used Bob's model in the past, I've always found that the part in the timeline that he calls passive looking always happens before the first moment. So that your first moment being on the far left at 9 o'clock on that cloud there. And you ask people, well, if you're aware of this product, why did it take you kind of a year or so before you thought, right, I need to go and actively look at that? I think that is that kind of almost connection with the circular moment there. When people have kind of bought a 3 Series BMW, they're aspirationally in the back of their mind very aware of the 5 Series, and it's just a matter of overcoming that financial constraint maybe before they can get there. So that's super interesting. Eckhart, we've been in the weeds for a long time, so why don't you pull us out and show us, can you bring this to life a little bit, show us some case studies, and anything that you have that relates to kind of the B2B world as well, and how this might relate to the B2B world would be super interesting.
We have, it's a great question. B2B world is more, there's some, can we delete this text maybe?
Usually if you exit out of presentation mode and then
I feel there's a comment. Okay. So this is a picture of the wheel of progress in action that Peter did with a big publishing house here in Germany. It's called Burda. And we have done B2B projects using the wheel of progress as well. Of course, it's more complicated. You need to talk to more people to have a complete picture. You need to piece it together. There are different roles involved. There's purchasing. There's maybe the CIO, maybe the CFO. They have conflicting perspectives on making progress. There's the CEO. There are the lines of business. So you need kind of a good amount of people to really piece together this customer journey of making progress. But it's possible. It's just more complex. But the principles are the same. This is the nice thing about this wheel of progress is a form factor, because you can use it in a classroom setting. You can work collaboratively. It's always better than working alone. It's always better to have a team, because everybody has a different perspective on what the customer said and how to interpret what the customer said. So it's much more valid. People have different experiences, different values. So they listen, and differently they hear different things. You need a moderator who moderates the process of the evaluation. And this is something you can learn. Here's another example of how we work post COVID. Of course, we had to go online, and we are using Mural. Peter built a great kind of an end-to-end template with, you can see on the left-hand side a lot of the wheels, and they represent all the interviews that we've did with all the kind of all the data in it. And then on the right-hand side, where you can see these kind of lines of colors, these were all the elements. I think it was like close to 1,000 that Peter processed here on the sheet. And you can see also, if you like, you can use the length of the line with the items as a weighting. You can see in a lot of the interviews, this force of progress, for example, came up as a like here, this big red line, and we paraphrase like everything. We collapse the data, we cluster the data, and then we give it a name. We cannot show unfortunately the results, because these are real, this real customer data. But maybe you can imagine that on the left-hand side, in each of the rows, the first one is a paraphrased force or paraphrased job to be done in yellow, or the paraphrased event. Sometimes we find patterns in events, like very typically something breaks and creates something, a need for not only replacing the product, but to look at a very different very different product category. It's really fascinating, and so we are able to handle the complexity of the data, paraphrase it, and then we put it back onto a wheel. and create like, this is like the prototype of this job to be done under these constraints with these pains and gains. And then we can further process it. For example, we like to use Alexander Osterwalder's value proposition canvas. In the right-hand side, the rounded shape is like where we put in the jobs, the pains and the gains. Also, you can, if you like, for that job pains and gains customer profile, can add the constraints. That gives you even more context. And then you can really create great value propositions that correspond to that customer profile.
Can you talk a little bit more about how your Wheel of Progress connects with the value proposition design canvas from Osterwalder? Because I think a lot of people that I've spoken to from this community especially always ask, well, how do you go from jobs to be done, research and insights, into actual product design? And I think this would
right. I don't have that slide with me, but just imagine that you get data here in the lower left, for example, with the current product that's in use. You get a lot of data on how to make it better, maybe how to create even new products, how to expand your portfolio. This is really the data for product management engineering. But also on the Osterwalder canvas, we have a customer relationship. We have the whole segment on pricing, how to price a product, and we can feed these fields also by other data from and a better understanding from using the Wheel of Progress. We can use like for customer relationship, the data from the first quadrant and the second quadrant, where we know these are the pushes, these are the habits, so we know what people like to do, and they like what they like of their comfort zone. But we also know what they hate. We know what they want and what they don't want. So we can use that data, and we are very specific in terms of, Peter called this a channel phase model. So each of the channel phases from Alexander Osterwalder can be fed with different data from our wheel. I didn't want to go into too much detail because it takes some time to explain that. But the goal of this whole exercise is not to do customer interviews and not to do even the analysis. It's really how to use the data. And we are very specific, as I said, we are prescriptive what kind of data you can use in order to make these decisions. And even for sales folks, there's great data in the wheel, because in the lower right corner you have all the stuff that can go into an FAQ when you talk about like objection handling. It's anticipating what other people in that cycle the kind of question they would ask. You find in the third quadrant where we put here the sales sticker, a lot of data that you can use for doing it. Also highlighting, I mean, knowing from people why they bought something, what were their hiring criteria. You can pull that out of that quadrant as well.
Yeah, sure. Just going to dive into the questions on the Q&A. So Stefano was asking about doing this in a B2B setting, and you said earlier, Eckhart, that it's just a bit more complex. Why is B2B a bit more complex, and what things do people need to think about when doing B2B jobs to be done?
I believe B2B is more complex because, of course, there are more people involved in buying the product, and you need to piece it together. You cannot talk only to the user. You have to talk to the people who had a decision in buying the product. And you can imagine like the airport project that I did. I mean, it would be stupid to go something. Why did you hire the Frankfurt airport? It's like nobody really can tell you why they hired, but you can break it down into smaller pieces, and and ask people about the last time they shipped something via the Frankfurt airport, like we ask the end customer, why did you ship something via the Frankfurt airport and not the other airport? And then they can tell you, okay, that's the reason why we did it, and this was the experience. So just phrasing the question differently, not just why did you buy it, but why did you? I mean, why did you go to that vendor that can help you the question? So you have to adapt also your questions and think about the concept is the same. It's always the same. Hiring something to solve a problem or to make progress in life. But how you need to think about how to phrase it. And we know that kind of many startups have also that question. It's like, how can I talk to people who bought a product if I never sold a product? And then we tell them, okay, just think about it, make a hypothesis. What is the job behind? And what do they hire today? And of course, they could not buy your product because it's not on the market. But what have they hired in order to do the job, right? So it's thinking about from that perspective, just kind of rising above and getting at a higher altitude, trying to understand the job to be done. And in the B2B space is asking for reference. Who else was involved in the purchasing process? Who else can I talk to? And kind of then, of course, piecing it together.
I think that's the key thing for me when I've done B2B jobs we've done before, is the complexity comes in how those decisions are being made, because you have buyers, but the buyers aren't necessarily users of the product. And then you have influencers on the decision making as well. And so there's just a lot more parties involved, and it's a much more complex sale, especially as you kind of move up in terms of size and value of that business. As you go from sole traders up to big enterprises and corporations, they get more and more complicated, without a doubt. But as you say, the principles of it remain the same. I think there's just more actors involved in my experience.
Yeah, never forget. I mean, it's always about people, right? It's not the company buys it. It's the people in the company. So that's really key, that there are no abstract facts. Everything that's abstract, you cannot work with. You always need to understand the people behind it. How is that fact affecting their decision? And that's really key to understand in any kind of business setting, whether B2B or B2C. But especially in B2B, if someone comes to me and tells me, well, we need to do this or that because of that abstract fact, I ask them, okay, what does it mean, that abstract fact? Like the fact that the oil price is going up or going down or whatever. What does that mean? How is that gonna influence the decision? That's really what we need to understand. Then we understand, then we have a chance to predict how people will behave in future.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of someone's asking about reading materials about B2B jobs to be done, there's a good piece that Bob did with Intercom. If you search online for Intercom jobs to be done ebook, you will come across a free book you can download, and it talks about how Intercom did jobs to be done research to kind of inform their own product development. That's a B2B product. I published a report earlier in the year as well about kind of jobs to be done in financial services for small businesses. If you kind of search 11FS small business jobs to be done, you'll find that report. So there's a few examples online, and when I kind of when I send out an email to everyone on Meetup after the event, I'll include the links in that. There's another question, and I hope I pronounce your name right. I think it's Niam. Has asked, a lot of what Bob talks about is tangible products like the mattress. How might you structure an interview for a digital, intangible product, like, say, for example, an augmented reality e-commerce app? Any experience in that, Eckhart?
No, I mean, we always work with, I think, with tangible products, but frankly, I don't see why you couldn't use jobs we done interviews for that kind of product category as well. It's like for services. Services are kind of mostly not tangible, but you can ask the same question. You just need to phrase it differently, and just maybe you have to look at the wheel and see what kind of questions can I really ask that person. For example, the user who was not involved in the purchasing process, you focus on the fourth quadrant, right? People who are not the users, who just did the purchasing, you ask more about, hopefully you have someone higher up in the hierarchy who caused that whole cycle to start, like the CEO or so. You can ask them about the first quadrant. How did this all started? And but frankly, I don't see why we couldn't ask about any product. Frankly, it doesn't even need to be a product. It can be some measure taken, some measure implemented into a company, and you can see how it came about and how people dealt with it. And we did. It's interesting. We did jobs without interview with a phone book publisher. And we asked them about, what was the first time where you thought about that your business could go away or could change dramatically? And they said, well, in '95, when the internet was kind of announced or pushed forward, it's like, we had the first thought there could be something happening. But it was not until the iPhone came out in 2008 when they said, okay, now we have to look actively for actively for new solutions, because eventually when people have all the phone book data on their phone and they are connected to the internet, there's no need for a published paper-based phone book anymore. So yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting that you've largely focused on tangible products. I've been doing jobs to be done for 6-7 years, and I've only ever really focused on intangible products, digital services. And for me, when I read Clayton's work, and he said it's not about the features and functions you provide, it's about the experiences you enable. For me, that pointed towards the massive opportunity in digital intangible services, because it's not necessarily about the bank account, it's about the services that sit around that bank account and helping you manage your money. That's what people are buying. That's the job to be done. And I wrote about this over the weekend. I called it the kind of customer value stack, and you can read it on humanizing.co. And in that, I looked at the product, the desired outcomes that sit above the product, and the desired outcomes usually can be translated from a product perspective into intelligent services. So a desired outcome from a financial perspective, and that's the area that I work in, could be, well, I want to get to the end of the month without going into debt. And so an intelligent service could be, well, in real time, we can send you a contextual message on your phone to say, whoa, hang on, you're spending way too much or way too fast this month. You might want to slow down a bit to make sure you stay out of debt before you get to the end of the month. And so that's, for me, I think jobs to be done works super well for intangible products, and especially digital services. I think it's a fantastic tool for that.
That's a great example, Ryan. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to mention one more thing. When you look at the wheel and you look, for example, at the top right corner, and you see those second quadrant, you can see all the desired outcomes, all what people want, and then you can compare that to the lower left. So diagonal comparison, you can see what people really experience. And is it that? I mean, are we fulfilling our our customers' desires. Is that really right? We can compare the lower left, the experience, with the lower right, what we promised. So is that in alignment? Do we deliver on what we promised? And this works for all kinds of products. There's no restriction to any product type.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not about the product. It's not about the product. It's about the experience, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Americo Alves says, Eckhart, do you have a community where people can jump in and demo or practice the Wheel of Progress framework with you?
Right now, we are, unfortunately, the jobs we done meetup that we have in Germany, it's in German, but we do have a LinkedIn group where we share experiences in English language. Peter and I, we are thinking much more about creating spaces for people to practice. Our masterclass right now is only in German, but within a lead time of just a couple of months, we could do something in English too. Help people to apply it. But we do have resources, and at least to get started right now, which is the Wheel of Progress implemented as a template in Mural. And this is just one piece out of the whole process, but at least people can get started and get experience with it and run into the questions, because with our method, there is no question about it. It creates questions, but this is also the quality of it, because you need to actively think about the customer answers and how to categorize them, how to classify them. But here we provide a little bit of guidance with this template. On the left-hand side, you can see the typical structure of how we do interviews under part 1. You can also see the color codes that we use, that we look at we always focus on the events at first. Then we ask, and then we map the forces and the vehicles that people hired and the constraints, and then we further pass the forces from red and green into the corners, and see where did they really occur. Do we really understand that? Sometimes you cannot really tell. Then we leave them in the donut and they are safe, but we didn't have to decide where to put them. Maybe in the next interview we can drill down on that question, and then we can clarify it. And then the last step, you can see the yellow stickies. They are about the jobs, the job to be done that we heard. Help me to, we put them in the lower left quadrant. One piece we haven't talked about is the arrow at 3 o'clock is the statement of desired progress. It's different from a job statement or job story. We wanted to put it on a higher level. It's like really expressing how people wanted to make progress. So we have some recommendations how to do it, but this template actually could be enough to get started and practice it and see how it works. And right now we don't have that kind of actively managed community, but if people have questions, they can either email Peter and myself, or they can use the LinkedIn Wheel of Progress community, and then we can answer questions.
That's great. I've not actually used the Wheel of Progress myself yet, but I really want to give it a go after talking to you today, Eckhart. It sounds really interesting. I think.
Yeah, Peter and I, we had a meeting today. We used it for ourselves. I mean, we eat our own dog food, and it really helps to structure the data. Even if you have no customer interviews, you can use it to populate things that that you've heard from customers, or start with your own. You bought something big maybe 6 months ago, so think about how did that come about? What did you go through? So this is really to bring it home. It's to start applying it to your own situation, or maybe do an interview with your partner or friend or something like that. And just get started on that.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that advice. You know, just diving in and getting started is always the best solution. You know, even if the customer interview doesn't go as well as you might have hoped, it doesn't matter. You will learn a hell of a lot from just doing. And even after doing jobs to be done for so many years now, I still find that I'm learning every time I do a new project. So I don't think we're learning anything else. Great. So yeah, let's leave it there. We're almost at the time. So yeah, where can we find out more about you and your work, Eckhart, and how can people get in touch with you? I guess this is it.
Yes, exactly. And we are really curious what people think, whether they applied it or not. I mean, here and then we hear about surprising stories about people using it that we never have thought of. You can buy, if you like, you can buy like an A1 poster that's huge. You can put it on the wall, or you can do like the mural template electronically. The only restriction is when people use it and want to advertise it in like a commercial setting. I'm a Wheel of Progress expert or whatever, then we'd like people to talk to us first. But within your company or for yourself, it's totally fine to use it.
That's great. And is that email address the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, this is that reaches Peter and myself. Yeah.
That's great. I know you're very active on LinkedIn as well, so I'm sure people can find you there. Well, thank you very much, Eckhart. Thank you everybody for joining and for asking lots of great questions as usual. Thanks everyone for their time. We'll be back very soon with another event coming up. And next time I will definitely enable chat. I'm sorry for that option was not included today. But until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon. And Eckhart, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.